morning and welcome to our third and final day of ANC Grassroots. We thank all of you for spending the weekend, the Thanksgiving weekend, with your ANCWR family. My name is Raffi Momjian, and I will be introducing this morning's Educate panel. By way of brief introduction, I'm currently a lecturer in the Department of Communication Studies at UCLA, where I teach First Amendment law to undergraduate students. It has been through my experience as both a lecturer and previously as a student activist on campus that has led me to appreciate the importance of education and campus life and the impact it has on our community and furthering our common cause. The ANCWR Grassroots Conference has been organized to motivate, activate, and educate our community on issues and concerns that will further advance Hagopian. Over the weekend, you had the opportunity to explore various ways that the ANCWR and the community has advanced our causes, whether it's through film and the arts, social media and messaging, and politics and campaigns. This morning's panel will explore an additional way to further advance our issues: education. It is through education that our history, our language, and our culture is spread through the halls of our universities. It is through education that our ancestors' oral stories and experiences are memorialized and shared within the four walls of the classroom. And it is through education that our next generation of high-taught activists and soldiers are groomed. One example that comes to my mind is a current UCLA student and Holy Martyrs Ferayan High School alumni, Fundukian-Thorossian, who single-handedly caused dozens of high school students to perform in-depth research on the Garapal issue and debate solutions through the prestigious Model UN Forum at UCLA. It is these types of issues, genocide education, and challenges in addressing these matters in the current education curriculum that three of the four panelists today, Raffi Momjian, Sara, Cohen, and Fundukian-Thorossian, will discuss this morning. In addition to the educational curriculum, no one will dispute that as activists, our cause goes beyond the classroom and the pages of our textbooks. Student life brings with it the opportunity to convey our message to a diverse body of students and instructors on campus who are ready and willing to listen to our message. After all, it's the student body who will become our future public officials, historians, journalists, policymakers, and lawyers. Who can forget that it was through the initiative and mobilization of Armenian American college students at UCLA back in 1997 who were able to single-handedly steer the university to vote against the Turkish Studies chair on campus. That's student activism. Developing and acquiring these skills and these tools to utilize our campus community and to do it well are the issues our fourth panelist, Shant Hagopian, will be exploring this morning. After you leave this conference today and you go back to your communities and your schools and you put the tools you learned to work, please remember that it is our grassroots. It is you, it's the person sitting to your left, to your right, it's everybody in this room who will take Hagopian to the next level. With that said, before we begin our discussion today, I'd like to briefly share with you a background and areas of expertise of our four panelists. First, we have to my left, Shant Hagopian. Shant Hagopian is one of our own ANCA Leo Sarkisian interns, former interns. He graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, with a degree in political science. He was also a summer fellow at Yale University College of Letters and Sciences, focusing on urban politics. At Berkeley, he taught an upper division course on 20th century genocide, and he'll be speaking a little bit about that today. He's currently a second year at Southwestern University's School of Law. We're in finals mode, but he's spent his weekend here with us today, so thank you for that, Sean. And he's also very active and a board member with the ANC San Fernando Valley West and the AYF Centralized High-Thought Committee. We also have with us Dr. Kathy Fundukian-Thorossian sitting to my left. She is currently the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services for the Glendale Unified School District. She previously served as the principal of Glenville High School from 2005 to 2008 and has more than 25 years of experience in education. Fundukian-Thorossian has continuously contributed to the Armenian American community through various organizations, including the Armenian Cultural Foundation, the ACF. Fundukian has also attended the Principal Center at Harvard University and is currently on the board of directors for the Character and Ethics Project. Please welcome Ms. Fundukian-Thorossian. Coming to us all the way from San Francisco, we have Raffi Momjian, who's sitting in the front row, who will be sharing his thoughts in a few moments. He presently serves as the Executive Director of Gen Ed, a nonprofit organization that provides educators the instructional materials, resources, and educational workshops to teach about human rights and genocide, especially the Armenian Genocide. Gen Ed was founded by Raffi and ANC WR activist Roxanne Balkaschak in 1997 when they determined the Armenian Genocide curriculum in California's educational framework had not been properly implemented. Please welcome Raffi. And last but certainly not least, we have Sara Cohen, who is Gen Ed's Education Director. She received her Master in Social Science Education from Florida State University and has taught in the social sciences for 7 years. She is also a Fulbright Scholar and also a recipient of the George Washington Medal of Honor. She was recently appointed to the Teaching Tolerance Advisory Board for the 2011-2012 school year. In forming its first advisory board, Teaching Tolerance chose Cohen as one of 22 educators out of more than 500 applicants from across the country. Cohen served as the Research Fellow for Teaching Tolerance in 2001, during which time she wrote an article about the Armenian Genocide titled "The World Was Silent." So without further ado, I'd like to first call up Dr. Kathy Fundukian-Thorossian. Thank you.
Thank you, Raffi, and thank you to the ANC Western Region for putting together such an innovative conference. I'd like to see more of them. This is a great opportunity to share thoughts and come together. So in order to effectively teach genocide in California, in our public schools, especially the Armenian Genocide, 3 factors need to be in place. This panel represents those elements. It's a committed school community, professional development, and student participation. And what I'll be presenting to you is Glendale's story, which is unique. Glendale is a community that is certainly committed to teaching the genocide, but it's also a community filled with students who have experienced firsthand stories of the genocide from their grandparents, great-grandparents. And so the Armenian population in genocide certainly helps drive the curriculum there. Now, what you'll hear about in a little bit is how teaching the Armenian Genocide specifically is a 10th grade standard in California. It's a world history standard. And California is one of 11 states that specifically identifies the Armenian Genocide as being required curriculum. But what any educator, what any teacher will tell you is that there are more standards than there are days in the year. And so teachers have to decide what they're going to teach. And it's based upon a few different factors. It's based upon, what fundamental standards will help my students get to the next level. They're called power standards. They provide the foundational lessons to help students be successful. And so they use 2 criteria, rigor and relevance. In terms of rigor, the Armenian Genocide is a template for genocide in the 20th century, to quote Professor Hagopian. It has the economic precursors, the political instability, and religious intolerance. And so you use that recipe over and over again in the 20th and 21st centuries, and you see genocide perpetuated. In terms of relevance, the Armenian Genocide certainly resonates for the population there. And it's an opportunity to help history come to life when students are able to share their own personal stories. Each of us probably have a story we'd like to share at any opportunity, and so those, our students in Glendale, also have that opportunity. And not just when teachers are teaching the Armenian Genocide, but also when we're teaching other genocides. Again, it's a template for genocide. And so when they're talking about Cambodia or Rwanda, I mean, the stories and the horrors are stories that our students can attest to and share personal experience about. Now, in order to become a teacher, you need to, at the high school level especially, you need subject area expertise. You need to major in the subject and then take an additional year to learn pedagogy, to earn your teaching credential. However, simply majoring in a subject doesn't provide you with that subject area expertise. In the 80s, Raffi mentioned how way back in the 90s, students at UCLA made some efforts. I guess I'll be going to ancient history in the 80s and talking about how in the 80s a student studying history at UCLA might never have heard of the Armenian Genocide. In fact, a student who attended UCLA, majored in history, and took courses by a man named Stanford Shaw, might actually be struggling and grappling with how to teach the content area as dictated by the state of California, because Stanford Shaw was a denier of genocide. So, you know, in those ancient times, we demonstrated against Stanford Shaw fairly regularly, but we were certainly not as successful because Stanford Shaw continued to teach at UCLA well past the millennium. So if the student had been fortunate enough to take a course by Professor Hagopian, they would certainly have trouble grappling with the subject area. And if had in turn taken a course funded by the Turkish government, certainly would have grappled with that topic, which is why professional development opportunities offered by the Genocide Education Project is so fundamentally important to help teachers prepare and grapple with the subject and feel comfortable teaching it. Rather than tell you how we teach genocide education, what we've done is interviewed some teachers. Glendale, again, is unique because we've been awarded several federal grants for professional development, which we use regularly and over the years to offer training to our teachers. While we may have 20 teachers district-wide who teach 10th grade history, we certainly have trained more than 10 times that amount in the last 5 or 6 years to learn about the Armenian Genocide. And that's thanks to the grants that we've awarded, grants whose fundings will dry out probably in the next few years. But let's listen to some teachers from Glendale High School who participated in the training. Or we can just stare at them. So one of the things that we notice, because you're staring at the video and not listening to them speaking, and now we have the Yera coin, which symbolizes what we want to instill in our students. We'll just not worry about the video. First, for those of you who noticed, I mean, the interviews were done fairly recently, and the background reflects that it was Halloween. So we don't, with Stan Bartosiak usually doesn't have that goofy hat behind him when he's talking about subjects, so I want to apologize for that. But what you would have heard Olivia Macaulay and Stan Bartosiak discuss is how in world history they bring in the Armenian Genocide and they talk about it, but how they also folded in to a U.S. history course. So in U.S. history, what Olivia teaches is, you know, Civil War, and reparation, and how do you move from a country divided to a country that moves together in a united fashion. And the topic, and the discussion topic that she builds upon, again, U.S. history is 11th grade, world history is 10th grade, is how does a country that has experienced so much loss and pain, how does that country forgive and move ahead? And the conversation in the classroom is, first it needs to be recognized. The wrongs have to be recognized. Reparation must be made before countries can move forward. And so that fundamental issue that we're grappling with today, those complexities are what the students are grappling with in a U.S. history class. So I mentioned three elements, that a committed school community and professional development. The third is student participation. In order to make sure that the genocide is not just taught, but learned and becomes a fabric of the community in Glendale, we have students preparing assemblies. On April 24th at Glendale or Rigor High School, you will see students presenting to their peers, their non-Armenian peers, their perspectives and representations of the horrors of not only the Armenian genocide, but genocide as a whole. That student participation helps other students understand what it means to be descendant and what it means to get to this greatest level of inhumanity. One of the other great things about having such a large Armenian population is that we established dual language immersion programs. So in Glendale, we have students learning Armenian and English and becoming biliterate and bilingual in our public elementary schools, in two of them. We also have dual language programs in Italian and German, in Korean, and Japanese, but the Armenian program was established because of our population, so that student participation and that community demand helped establish and ensure the success of those dual language programs. And so in those programs, what you might see after the video, what you would have seen on the next video, is teachers in that dual Armenian program talking about how they teach genocide. And again, in kindergarten, it's about being nice to one another. We're certainly not talking about horrors. But it gets progressively more rich and more complex in terms of the discussion that students have in class. In fact, I brought one. So in the kindergarten class, we have students coloring and talking about their history. And in a fourth grade class, talking about poems and writing paragraphs. Let me just read the last line. Armani Hayaska. So these are public school students learning about their culture, their history, and themselves. The Glendale story will certainly continue in terms of developing lesson plans for every teacher at the grade level so that in one day they can learn. And this is something that Dr. Fundukian and I spoke about a couple of years ago. We have yet to realize using those materials to try and teach our students and allow our teachers the foundational tools with which to teach. So in your packets you have the requirement, you have the professional development opportunities, you have some websites, and you have our next steps. But to talk further about the student participation and the integral role that students play in teaching, I'd like to invite Shant Hagopian.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning. I'd first like to start off by saying saying thank you to the ANC Grassroots Committee. They've done a phenomenal job, to all the volunteers and to the committee itself for making sure this weekend was successful. I'd also like to thank my fellow panelists. Today I want to talk about a few things. Well, I want to talk about two things. First, I want to put things in perspective for you, tell you why education is important. And then finally, after that, I want to go back on a micro level and give you an example of how I owned education, as you might say, and implemented it in my own way at the University of California, Berkeley. So first off, why education is important. And I'd like to start off by telling the story of my first class at the University of California, Berkeley, when I taught a class on 20th century genocide. To start off my first class, I invited a professor named Malcolm Potts. He was an anthropologist. And you might be thinking, what does an anthropologist have anything to do with genocide? This is hardcore science, leaps and bounds from genocide. But he came in and he had an interesting point. And he had studied humanity, or he had studied all the species, and he had studied anthropology. And he basically came to the conclusion that genocide is an evolutionary anomaly, and that there is no species on the earth, whether extinct or in present taxation, that kills its own kind. And so from there, we set up the class and we said, well, if genocide is not in our DNA, it must be learned. It must be a product of governments. It must be a product of regimes. And if it's something like that, then if we learn, if we're educated on the subject of genocide, we could stop it, we could prevent it, and we could move forward and maybe have a society one day from now that says we don't commit genocide. We haven't committed, our humanity has not committed genocide for the last 100 years. So that's how we started off the class. But back to the first topic. Why is genocide education important? Well, we all know that the last step to genocide is its denial. Unfortunately, as a community, we have seen that denial close, front, up, and center. We have combated this denial in the halls of Congress, in our state legislatures and city councils. We have flexed our grassroots muscle in this way for some time, and we will continue to do so for some time, pressing for more recognition, more action, and more justice. That kind of grassroots activism is only one component to a larger equation to bring justice and proper recognition. Another component is education. Education is just as vital to our cause as passing resolutions and standing in unity in April. We must invest in the next generation. After all, as Raffi correctly put it, the leaders of tomorrow are being taught today. It would be naive to neglect that fact, because the students of today will not be the deniers of tomorrow if they are taught the truth right now. In that sense, genocide education not only should include the Armenian Genocide, but education about its denial. Those who wish to deny the Armenian Genocide have already recognized the crucial role of education and are working to legitimize their arguments through academic scholarship, namely through the funding of Turkish studies departments for the purpose of printing propaganda with the university seal. This makes the role of education even more important, and our presence in education that more urgent. Education is a grassroots effort. The Armenian community, the grassroots, is in the best position to ensure that the Armenian Genocide is being properly taught in our schools. It is the community that is in our schools. It is the community that is part of the PTA. And it is the community that is interacting with educators. Education doesn't have to start and stop in the classroom. ASAs, Armenian fraternities, and sororities can play a vital role in their schools. A few years back, I had the luxury of being a leader in the Armenian ASA at UC Berkeley, and we had screen screamers, and I'm sure our executive director will remember we brought him out. He was in San Francisco, and we took questions, and it was in April. And we took Armenian Genocide education outside of the classroom, but kept it in the university setting. So Armenian Genocide education doesn't have to stay in the classroom. You could use all the tools and use the university as a resource. So bringing panels, talking to professors, all go a long way. So with that said, with hopefully laying the framework of why education is important, I'd like to talk about how I implemented that idea at a micro level. I taught a class named Perspectives on Genocide. And before I say that, I'd like to say I was a student while I taught this class, and I had the opportunity because I luckily went to a university that had something called democratic education, where students can teach classes. And so as part of UC Berkeley's democratic education program, like I said, it offered 2 units to an upper division requirement. These are examples of other schools that offer these democratic education programs where if you went to any of these schools or plan to go in the future, you could start a class yourself. So I want to go into the logistics of teaching a course. Before I start out, like Raffi said before, I am in law school now, and at no point did I thought I wanted to be an educator. But now that I am in law school, I kind of hope that I maybe turned out to want to go into education. But that's a different story for a different day.
Call me.
But to set up a course in this democratic education program requires a lot of legwork in the beginning, mostly inside of your syllabus, and your syllabus is what gets approval ultimately by the department you're proposing it to. So it's not in the handouts today, but I've submitted it to the committee, and it should be available online. You have my syllabus and how I structured my course as a starting point for you. Feel free to copy it and use it as a, take it all together, or maybe just look at it if you're thinking about starting your own course. So basically, the things you need is a syllabus, you need your reading materials, and you need to receive approval. And so this was my lead up to my syllabus and what I thought the course would be. My motivations were to educate students on historical examples of genocide, genocide denial, intervention, and prevention. I started with the Armenian Genocide, and I ended with Darfur, which was the current genocide at the time, weaving in the similarities and differences between all the genocides as we went along through the 20th century. But in no place did I label myself an expert, and in no place did I think myself as a lecturer. The course was very interactive, and I brought in guest speakers along the way. These were some of my reading materials. I had assigned Samantha Power's Problem from Hell and Final Solutions. I found that they didn't go in depth as much as I would like, but they gave a great overview to start a classroom discussion. And like I said before, the class was more discussion than lecture. I brought in a lot of guest speakers. I gave you the example before of bringing in an anthropologist on my first day. It was very multimedia heavy. I used a lot of videos. I actually showed screeners to my class as well. And I made it more of an informal setting where we could learn and discuss about genocide without having to be a formal classroom and all the things that come with it. My final thoughts is, like I said before, if you're interested in doing something like this, teaching a class sounds more daunting than it really is. And like I said before, you do not have to teach a class to be active in education in your community setting. So if you want more information, or maybe you're interested in starting a class, this is my email here. With that said, I'd like to invite Raffi Momjian to talk about Genocide Education Project.
Okay, so before I start, I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview as far as what I'm going to talk about as Sara. Since Sara is the education director with the Genocide Education Project, what I want to do is just kind of give a quick background about the organization and the work we do and what we as a community can do as far as when working with teachers and schools and what have you. Sara will go in much more detail about that and make it presented in a way where it's practical for anyone who wants to get involved to be involved. Now, as far as what the Genocide Education Project is and what we do, we are an educational organization, and ultimately our goal is to make sure that the Armenian Genocide is being taught in American high schools. We work with secondary schools, but literally at high school level is where it is being taught, and we secondary school level resources and providing them the teachers they also need. Just a quick background, we started in 1997 in the San Francisco Bay Area. At that time, we focused strictly on Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area schools. 2004, we applied for our 501c3 nonprofit status, and by then we had already expanded our scope to work with nationwide, with all states, was across the country. Now, as far as specifically with the resources that we provide, what we try to do, and it's important to understand that before we started, the majority of the resources, if not all, 95%, whatever, were mainly for college level courses or that type of level resources. There was very little material available for secondary schools teachers, meaning, at the time you had Fundukian-Thorossian's or Professor Momjian's publications. You can't put something like that in front of a 14, 15-year-old. What you really are asking the teacher to do is to read all that material themselves and produce the lesson plans themselves, which, as Kathy mentioned, considering all the challenges they have, that is simply not going to happen. It can't happen. So what we try to do is create specific resources that teachers can use. These are very detailed resources in the sense that they walk teachers minute by minute, day by day, exactly how to walk, to teach a lesson on the Armenian Genocide. And we try to come up with different types of resources to address the different styles teachers may have, as well as the different challenges they may have. For example, we have your basic traditional lesson here. This is actually 3 different units in here, a 1-day unit, 2-day unit, and actually even a 10-day unit for those rare circumstances where a teacher can actually devote 2 weeks on the genocide. Usually that's actually an elective course on human rights and genocide, so they can spend 2 weeks on the one topic, on the Armenian Genocide. And I forgot to actually mention, I guess it was assumed, our primary focus is the Armenian Genocide. So whenever I'm talking about genocide, specifically the Armenian Genocide that we focus on. The other thing to notice is that we're looking at a lesson plan here. Even the 1-day unit has a 1-page, maybe 2 pages of instructions for teachers. The 2 days, I think, has 4, and the 10-day one is whatever, 8, 9 pages. The point here is that you're looking at a 200-page binder here. The reason that's the case is that everything we produce is a standalone unit, meaning a teacher, once they have that material with them, then they don't need anything else. They don't need to go out and find the homework assignment, or they don't need to go out and create the overhead project, the overheads and what have you. It's just really made, I'd like to think of it as a kind of a turnkey operation, if we don't steal that from from a business school. But and we try to use a web-based material, as web-based resources as well as computer-based. We've even actually created a class, an online class for teachers. Since most teachers don't have the time to be able to spend on every single item that they are required to teach, they don't have the time in class, what we've actually created is an online class where the teacher, all they have to do is go out and go get on and create a virtual classroom and then assign that unit as homework for their students. And once the student is done going through that lesson, all they have to do is go in and grade their responses. And again, it might sound weird saying, oh, you're going to teach a genocide class on online. It's very interactive, and we've received a lot of great responses from both students and teachers on the approach we've taken. Now, the second part of the work we do is actually a training. Again, we can create all the resources that we can, that teachers may need, but that only addresses the one small piece of the puzzle. The main component of what needs to be done is we need to get those resources in the teacher's hands, show them how to use it. And in this particular case, since we're dealing with genocide and Holocaust type education, the most important part is talking to them about how to teach about these things so that it's done in a meaningful way. Which basically means not only talking about who did what to who and what's the dates and what the geographic location, but talking about why these things happen, how they happen, and what we as a community, as individuals need to do to make sure that it doesn't happen under our watch, right? And also putting the Armenian Genocide in context of other genocides. What does it mean when we say the Armenian Genocide was a prototype of other genocides? We can say that, but how can you convey that to a student? How do you work with that? And how does the Armenian Genocide fit within context of World War I or world history? These are all subjects that we need to kind of walk through teachers with and and they need to be trained on it. And that's, I think, in my opinion, the most important piece of part of the work that we do. Now, a couple of things here as far as our web presence, and I want to talk about this because for anyone who wants to get involved in any way, I think these, at least the two main sites are key to know about. One, oops, I forgot that slide, who we are. That's who we are. As far as the websites, we have teachgenocide.com. This is the first site we've created. This is an online resource library specifically designed for high school teachers to help them teach about the Armenian Genocide. It is the only one out there of its type. It's a library that the teacher can use, get on, and they can actually, all the material on there, or I would say the large majority of the material on there is available for download, and it's free. And it's designed to be used in a classroom as is. Meaning a teacher, if they don't want to, they don't have to do anything to be able to utilize this, to use this material. Or obviously if they do want to modify it to suit their own needs, they can do that as well. So any teacher, I don't care where they're located, either in the United States or around the world, as long as they have an internet connection, they have a whole list of resources available to them at their fingertips. We're talking about videos, lesson plans, posters, anything you can imagine that pertains to the Armenian Genocide. The second one is learngenocide.com, and that is the site I was referring to earlier, which is our online classroom. And lastly, genocideeducation.org, which is just our organizational website for people who want to know more about us. Now, again, as far as requirements, these are key. There are 11 states around the country that require that the Armenian Genocide be taught, which of course includes California. This is the first step in the process of being able to see the Armenian Genocide in classrooms. Because the challenges teachers have, if it's not in the requirement, unless they have a personal connection, we rarely find teachers being able to devote time on the subject, unless, again, it is required for them to do so. And it's very important for us to be able to understand that just because it's required, again, it's a first step, but it's by no means in any way, shape, or form a guarantee. In many ways, this was actually the catalyst of the work why we started doing the work we did. In California, it was required in '85. In '97, when we looked at this in the Bay Area, we realized nobody's teaching it. The question was why, and the answer was because we need someone to, again, provide the resources and the education and so on. Now, what can we do as a community to be able to make sure that the Armenian Genocide is getting taught? I'm going to make this brief. I'm getting the signal. And again, since Sara will go into more detail, I'm just going to give a very brief kind of general overview. I look at it in 3 different levels. The first level is state level. We need to make sure that the requirements remain where they are. They can the state can easily remove it just as quickly as they added it. So we as a community need to make sure to let them know we're watching, we know it's there, and it needs to remain there. Clearly, if you're in a state that doesn't require it, it's to work with them to make sure that it's added. Second thing is school districts. We need to work at a school district level. One, to make them, to let them know that if they're required to teach it, they need to provide the resources and the support for their teachers to do that, and you can work with them to help them do that. And the second thing is textbooks. In California, textbooks are selected at a district level, and they need to tell the publishers that the next time they're going to review their book and decide if they're going to buy it for their schools, one of the items, in addition to the list of items they look at, one of the items has to be, they're going to be looking at, will be the Armenian Genocide and how well it is covered and how accurate, of course, the information is. And once the publishers know that, it's a business. They want to sell their books. And if they're going to sell their books, if their customer says, these are one of the things I want, they're going to make sure to provide the customer what they want. And lastly is at a school level, which basically means with teachers. Working with your teacher, and this is very important, working with your teacher and helping them meet the challenges, and they have a lot of challenges, helping them meet their challenges so that they are able to teach about the Armenian Genocide. Most teachers we have found, this is not like it is in the political arena. When it comes to the education arena, most teachers we have found want to be able to teach about other than just the Holocaust. But again, if you don't provide them solutions, that's it. You'll get their heartfelt, support. That's pretty much all you're going to get. And the other thing is I just want to add is as individuals, there's no reason why we as individuals cannot go into the classroom and talk to students about our experience, whoever we may be, second, third, fourth generation Armenian, after the survivors. There's no reason why we cannot talk to them and explain to them what it means to be an Armenian American. We've done that in the Bay Area and other areas, and it resonates so well. And you don't need to be a historian. You don't need to go in and talk about the history of the Armenian Genocide. Just talk about what it means to you to be an Armenian. As you do, I'm sure, every time you meet an Oda, do the same thing in front of students. Seeing an actual Armenian talk about their experience resonates so well. And I'm going to stop here, and Sara is come on next.
My name is Sara Cohan. I'm the Education Director for the Genocide Education Project. I've been both a classroom teacher, an Armenian American activist, and a coordinator in the field of professional development. So I feel like I can see the situation of community members and educators coming together from both perspectives. It's really important that when we go into work to meet with teachers and administrators, that we remember that they're overworked, underpaid, fearful of layoffs. They have no funds for professional development or even basic classroom materials. New demands on them each year coming from district, state, and national levels. They are worn. And the last thing that they can handle are more directives sent at them. But we as Armenian activists also have concerns. We are frustrated, we are often angry, sad, and exhausted from trying to demand recognition for one of the greatest tragedies of human history. Oftentimes, when we meet together, the teacher and the community activist, it becomes very, very emotional and can easily turn negative. For example, if we as a community activist address a teacher who again is already overworked, underpaid, exhausted, and we say the Armenian Genocide is mandated in the state of California, you must teach it. That oftentimes does not win them over. But instead, you can approach them in a different way and have tremendous success. Because like you, teachers are passionate. They care about what they teach. They want to make a difference. By lending them support and guidance regarding the history of the Armenian Genocide and the mandate, then that will ensure our history is taught in American schools. Politicians are very, very different from teachers. They answer to lobbyists and donors. Teachers don't. They answer to their own conscience. And for that, they give us a tremendous opportunity to work with them in teaching about truth and justice. In just a few days, I'll be in Washington, D.C. at the National Council for the Social Studies Annual Conference. This is one of the highlights of my year, and yes, I am a geek. The teachers from all over the United States come to this conference. It's the largest one for social studies each year. And we at the Genocide Education Project have phenomenal opportunity to be a part of their exhibit area. We also always participate in panel discussions as well as give lectures, etc. But in the exhibit area especially, we have a flow of teachers, usually between 800 and 2,000 that make it, or through our booth, 800 and like 1,500 coming by our booth and receiving our materials and speaking with us in the course of just a few days. A woman from Kansas who may be of British Baptist descent will tell us that she found our website online and has been teaching the Armenian Genocide to her classes in Kansas ever since. A young man from Maine will say that he was inspired by reading about the Armenian Genocide in the New York Times, and found our website and is now having his students write letters to their elected officials regarding the denial. These stories from non-Armenians in no way connected to our community are exhilarating. Because with teachers, again, they want to teach about justice and truth. So if we can provide them with the training and resources to do so, it will be done. Sometimes I think on Capitol Hill, it's very easy to get a meeting with your elected official. Okay? And you can have time to tell him the history of the Armenian Genocide and the importance of recognition. And then he or she goes to Congress and nothing happens. On our end, the hard part is getting the meeting, is being allowed to provide the training and resources because of teachers' time, because of the lack of funding for substitute teachers for professional development workshops. If we can sit down with the teachers, then they will teach what we've asked. In front of you, there's a handout, or two handouts actually, that are kind of somewhat simple, basic steps that you all can take as community members to become more involved in education initiatives in your community. Some of you will maybe leave this session inspired and want to rededicate all your community service time towards genocide education. And that would be wonderful. But most of you may do one or two things. Others may find it interesting and pass on the information. But what we can all do is all remember to vote in school board elections. It's absolutely key. Thank you. It's absolutely necessary, to participate in such elections. We, as Armenian Americans, we generally vote in presidential, state elections, but sometimes, especially with school board elections, if they're on an off year, that might be an election we pass over, but it's an extremely important one. Also, follow up with your elected officials and let them know about your interest in supporting the California mandate to teach the Armenian Genocide. Praise them for the positive actions that they may have done in their community, while offering support for them to do more. In some of your communities, especially in California, the school district will have participated in April 24 events or ensured that the Armenian Genocide is part of world history curriculum. And other communities, if this is not the case, praise them for their work on Holocaust education and say it's wonderful that you're already doing work on the Holocaust. It gives a perfect opportunity to also expand it to other genocides, including the Armenian. Link your elected officials with the programs and resources that will provide the support for their educators to include the Armenian Genocide into the curriculum. Find out what committees you as a community member can be involved in. Oftentimes, school districts use community members in their textbook adoption committee. And this would be a wonderful way to serve the Armenian cause and strengthen the opportunities for teachers to have a solid history to work from in their classrooms. Finally, even school board officials are busy. Keep up in regular communication with them. If you're not on their radar, if you have to keep yourself on their radar, they have too many things from too many directions going on, and your voice will be lost if you're not consistent in your communication. The next level is at the school level, and school administrators and teachers. You join the PTA, join a parent advisory committee, determine what components of genocide education exist in the school, and then work with the school to strengthen weak components or establish those that are missing. Donate materials to the school. Resource guides like the one we have, lesson plans, videos, additional books for the library. We have on our website, there's a list of recommended reading materials by age group that could help serve as a guide if you are looking to make donations of that sort to your school or community library. And but infuse the principles of genocide education into the school's overall approach to teaching about history and human rights. Meaning that it suggests that the Armenian Genocide doesn't have to be a standout lesson strictly on the history, but that it actually blends into larger themes of world and U.S. history. And so that it can be incorporated not just in a day, but threaded out throughout the year, as with appropriate themes and subjects. Finally, I'll volunteer to speak at the school. Volunteer to speak with groups of students. And oftentimes when I say this to groups, they become nervous because they're not experts in history. But you don't have to be. The teacher that you work with should be the expert. And you can give her or him the resources to become one. Provide them with links to our readings, our lesson plans, and she or he can take care of that. You come in as the community member, as the descendant of Armenian Genocide survivors. You tell the personal story, the story that the teacher can't tell, the story that will contextualize the history, humanize it, bring it out of the paper, and the students can give them a sense of something to truly embrace. Because what you can bring to the classroom is especially the idea that genocide doesn't end with the survivors, that it continues on to their children, and their children, their children. In this room, most of us are probably the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of survivors. And we know that with each generation, that pain is continually transmitted, especially considering our genocide is denied. So this is a voice that is, I think, most natural for us as Armenian American advocates, and also the one that is most unique for public schools. Finally, community level efforts. These are very simple things. If you're doing an event, if you're doing even an event at the church, if you're doing a community event, invite your elected officials, invite your teachers, invite your school administrators. Make them feel as an honored part of the Armenian American community, and intrigue them by attending, whether it's a concert or a play. Make them your special guests, and begin to show them how rich the Armenian culture is, how many resources there are out there for them to then integrate to the schools. If you want to provide school buses to bring students to events. Right now, educators are not going to turn down funding. So if you can afford the school buses and the drivers, take them to an Armenian event. Take them to the Getty and have them ask the Getty curators why they're holding on to the manuscripts. Just an idea. And the second handout that I have is our talking points. These are just simple ideas of ways that you can approach both talking about the Armenian Genocide and genocide education with your officials, your district officials, and your school, your school administrators and teachers. One thing that's important to point out here is, especially when you're talking to world history teachers, is that we have informal language and formal language as Armenians. And it's definitely important for us to use formal language when talking to teachers because they're going to be very sensitive to those issues. And what I mean by that is, in my informal conversations with Armenians, I say Turks. Okay? The Turks killed Armenians in 1915. If I'm speaking with a group of non-Armenian educators, I want to be very clear to say Ottoman Turks. I don't want to just say Ottoman, because I want Turkey responsible, and they were Turkic. So I say Ottoman Turks. But it's very important to qualify that, the Ottoman aspect. So just little simple things like that are very important in conveying that message to educators and to making the message, I guess, to appealing to their sense of what they already know about history. And hopefully they know about the Ottoman Empire, though you know that. And so the final note I want to leave you with is that there are aspects of, even in these steps, that may seem very difficult and daunting, then that's why we exist. We provide the resources, the websites, but also we're more than happy to provide specific personal assistance. If you're reaching out to your school district and you're not sure how to find out if they have had Armenian-related activities, you give us a call. We'll be more than happy to help you with that research. If you have questions about specific ways to address your school district, again, let us know and we'll be more than happy to help. And even as you're preparing, if you do go in a classroom and speak with students and you want some ideas, you want to brainstorm with somebody, again, we're just a phone call, email away. And while we're a small organization, this is the part of our work that we truly, truly enjoy, is the interaction with activists who are willing to give up their personal time and get out into public schools and spread the message. Thank you.